So I just wanted to thank Win Visible really for inviting me here to speak on behalf of social workers. And I also wanted to say that I have other qualifications that I hold much dearer, not just professional, but actually first and foremost being a woman and being a mother and being a single mother and also being a survivor of domestic violence. I think those are important issues in my life. It comes to something when even members of the status quo are raising their concerns about the effects of welfare reform on children and families. And Anthony Douglas, he's the chief executive of CAS. That is the organisation which safeguards the welfare of children involved in court proceedings. He said this in January. He said, given what we know about the association between poverty, deprivation and care, the increase in economic difficulties can take away the margins of support for people who are just managing to keep things going. He went on to say, often quite small amounts of support can make all the difference. So I think that there is a risk of underestimating the way in which this support can keep some families going. In my opinion, the most important part of social work is the time social workers spend building trusting relationships with children and families. Interestingly, the coalition government commissioned an independent review of child protection in 2010, which was led by Professor Eileen Munro, and she strongly advocated for the reinstatement of relationship-based social work. Sadly, I have to tell you that in spite of Eileen Munro's efforts, reports and recommendations to improve practice, that is not what is happening on the ground. Last year, my organisation, Basil, conducted a survey of its members, which was called the State of Social Work. We had 1,100 social workers across the UK who contributed to that. What they told us paints a harrowing picture. We have social workers who are overloaded with far too many cases. Their admin support has been cut back to the point that they are having to do even more bureaucratic tasks, taking them away from frontline face-to-face work with children and families. Many have sleepless nights worrying about the safety of children they are working with in spite of working around the clock. 88% believe lives could be put at risk as a result of cuts to services. One person told us that the team I work in is working at dangerous caseload levels in terms of child protection work. 85% of respondents have seen notable cuts to services in the last 12 months. 78% have witnessed job cuts or unfilled posts, and 80% find it hard to actually work effectively. This is a sad state of affairs and not what social workers came into the profession for. They wanted to make a difference to the lives of children and families, but not feel powerless as they watch families go under. This survey went on to become the subject of an APPG inquiry, and the report will be out very soon. However, what I want to say to the politicians is we don't just want you to listen to us, but to act, and to act urgently. If we carry on like this, we are going to turn the clock back in this country to a century where the poor law determined what can only be described as the most meagre means of survival for the marginalised in society. Charles Dickens would be turning in his grave if he was here today and saw what beset poor families. We were further saddened last week when Alan Milburn told us that there was not a cat and hell's chance of the government hitting the 2020 child poverty target. And in fact, the Institute for Fiscal Studies is estimating that children living in absolute poverty will increase from 2.8 million to 3.1 million by 2020. And for children living in relative poverty, this will climb from 2.5 million to 3.3 million. I know that there are many other speakers on. I'm just going to try and sum up some of the things I wanted to say. I really wanted to talk about International Women's Day this year, because the theme of International Women's Day was to end violence against women and girls. And what the Secretary General of the United Nations said is there is one universal truth applicable to all countries, cultures and communities, that violence against women is never acceptable, never excusable and never tolerable. What I think happens in this country is that we get complacent and we think, oh, let's look at the rest of the world and see some of the unspeakable atrocities that are being committed, and somehow that makes us feel that we can, somehow rest easier. But that's not the situation, again, necessarily that's happening for women and children. Theresa May actually said on International Women's Day the government could only do so much, and it was really for people to speak out. And I would have to beg to differ with her and say, if you are somebody who is experiencing domestic violence, one of the hardest things would be to speak out, because your power has been taken from you, including your voice. And so it is not enough just to speak out. Women who are trying to escape or trying to flee from domestic violence must have support and provision to enable them to do that. And what we're seeing is an erosion of that support. Women's refuges, independent domestic violence advisors, even courts are closing, making women have to travel further to get to their court to make their case. A tragic case that happened only a few weeks ago, we've seen treatment programmes for sex offenders also being cut. And there was an example in Suffolk where a sex offender was released from prison, failed to get the treatment that he should have received in prison, and then he went on to re-offend and commit an assault on a 5-year-old girl. And then this is not acceptable, but we really are turning the clock back with these cuts. So all I want to say to finish is speaking out is not enough. We have to invest in a caring society that provides support for those who need it, when they need it, in order to help them to gain control over their lives and have a hope for their future and their children's future. I do have to leave very soon because I do have to go and look after my own children, but I just thank you very much and please support this very important launch.